I've received a lot of questions from landlords who are at their breaking point. On the one hand, they're unable to collect any rents from non-paying tenants, while on the other hand, they're also unable to recover possession of their properties because of the widespread eviction bans. At the same time, they have to continue making payments to the same governments that are preventing them from recovering possession of their properties. They have to make tax payments, utilities payments, garbage, sewer, and so forth. So they've been asking me what assistance is available for them. As I covered in the video a few weeks ago, Congress has just appropriated $25 billion toward a new rental assistance program. However, the funding for that program has yet to make its way to the states, and the states are far from being ready to implement it. So is there anything else available for landlords right now? Well, the answer is yes. Although a lot of landlords are unaware of this, the EIDL program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, is available to landlords. I'm going to explain all the details of this program and what landlords need to know in this video. Coming up. Hey guys, if we're just meeting, my name is Vitaly Volpov. I'm a practicing attorney, an active real estate investor, and a part owner of a real estate brokerage in upstate New York. On this channel, I discuss relevant legal concepts as well as best strategies and tips for real estate investing and personal finance. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you of all my future content. If you enjoy the content in this video, hit the like button and comment down below. As always, whenever I'm discussing legal concepts, just remember, nothing that I say in this video should be construed as legal or financial advice. I provide this information for educational and entertainment purposes only, and you should always consult with your own attorney and your own advisor before making any legal or financial decisions. Last but not least, the views and opinions that I express in this video are my own alone and don't necessarily reflect those of my law firm or any of my business partners. So for those of you who have been following my channel for a while, a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is going to be a review of prior concepts that I've previously discussed. However, for those people who are new to the channel and those landlords who are potentially finding this video while looking for answers with regard to government assistance, I think the information you're going to hear today is going to be very valuable. So let's talk about the EIDL loan program as it applies to landlords. So first of all, EIDL stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and it is a program which contains a loan component and a grant component. And the first and primary question for the purposes of this video is, are landlords or rental property owners eligible for EIDL loans and/or grants? And the answer is generally yes. The Small Business Administration had stated in their guidance early on that owners of rental property, and that's a quote from their guidance, are considered small businesses for purposes of EIDL eligibility. I personally know several landlords who were successful in obtaining EIDL grants and loans in the summer of 2020 when the program was first rolled out. In order to be eligible for a loan under the EIDL program, an applicant must be an eligible entity. An eligible entity for the purposes of this video includes a business with fewer than 500 employees, or any individual who operates under a sole proprietorship with or without employees, or as an independent contractor. So an LLC or a corporation that owns a rental property or properties would qualify under subparagraph A as a, quote, small business, as long as it has fewer than 500 employees. On the other hand, an individual who owns a rental property or properties in his or her own name would also qualify under subparagraph B, regardless of whether they have employees. Now, there are several other requirements that determine whether someone who's applying for this program is going to be eligible or not. The first requirement is that in order to be an eligible entity, you must have been in business prior to January 31st, 2020. This means that if a property is owned by an LLC or a corporation, the LLC or the corporation must have been in existence and owned that property prior to January 31st, 2020. If the property is owned in an individual's name, the individual must have owned that property prior to January 31st, 2020. So if you bought your property in, say, June 2020, and then suffered a financial hardship because your tenants stopped paying your rent, well, unfortunately, you will not be eligible for this program under these requirements. Another very important requirement is that you must have suffered an economic injury as a result of the pandemic and/or the government's response to the pandemic. The SBA has indicated that it considers a borrower to have suffered an economic injury if the borrower was unable to meet its ordinary expense obligations as they came due. Tenants being unable to pay rent and the landlord being unable to recover the property because of eviction bans would certainly qualify, in my view. However, if you have not suffered any financial hardship because none of your tenants have missed rent, then you would not be eligible for any grants or loans under this program. I think it's also important to mention the loan amount limits. So during the initial rollout of the EIDL program, the loans appeared to be based on the amount of lost income that the borrower reported on their application. More recently, however, the SBA's position has been that they will provide for up to 6 months of the business's operational expenses with an overall cap of $150,000. In the case of landlords, operational expenses would include all of the property's expenses, which would include mortgage, taxes, utilities, repairs, maintenance, and so forth. Now, there's some disagreement or lack of clarity with regard to whether repairs can qualify as operational expenses. Without getting into too much detail in this video, the exclusion of repairs, in my opinion, is not applicable to the pandemic-related EIDL program. In other words, I think that repairs, in the case of rental properties, should be considered as operational expenses and should be allowed as permitted use of EIDL funds. Now, with regard to the loan terms, EIDL loans have a 30-year repayment or amortization term. Their interest rate is 3.75% for for-profit organizations and 2.75% for not-for-profit organizations. Payments can be deferred for up to 1 year, but interest continues to accrue during the deferment period. In a case where the borrower is an entity, in other words, an LLC or a corporation, no personal guarantees are required for any loans below $200,000. And since all loans so far have been capped at $150,000, no borrowers should have been required to provide any personal guarantees in order to obtain their loans. Loans over $25,000 do require the borrower to agree to let the SBA create a blanket lien against all of the borrower's assets as collateral. All assets except for real estate. In the case of collateral, collateral is very broadly defined and includes all assets of a borrower. For landlords, this would be any furniture, if the apartment is furnished, any appliances, tools, etc. Collateral also includes all money in bank accounts owned by the borrower, as well as valuable legal rights that the borrower may have. Think IOUs owed to the borrower by third parties. In the event of a default on the EIDL loan by the borrower, the SBA would have a right to foreclose on the lien and take the borrower's collateral to try to satisfy the outstanding loan balance. There are also many other loan terms that I don't have time to get into in this video, but if you guys want to check those out, I'll put some links to prior videos that I did where I discussed them in detail. So that's an overview of the EIDL loans. Now let's talk briefly about EIDL grants. In order to qualify for a grant, an applicant must, at minimum, meet the criteria of what's called an eligible entity, which I discussed earlier. There are some additional criteria now for obtaining EIDL grants that I will discuss in a moment. Originally, the SBA limited grants to $1,000 per employee per applicant, and this created a lot of controversy. Where an applicant was a sole proprietor or an LLC with a single member, the SBA treated the sole proprietor or the single member as one employee and awarded $1,000 while the grant funds were still available. In fact, the grant funds ran out so quickly when the program was first initiated in March of 2020 that Congress had to appropriate more funds, and the program was briefly reopened in June and July of 2020 and finally closed on July 15th until, we hope, reopening again in January 2021. And so with regard to the reopening of the program, Congress passed a new stimulus bill adding more funding and requiring the SBA to provide eligible applicants with $10,000 grants per applicant. There are two sections in the new stimulus bill that appear to create two different ways to obtain an EIDL grant. They're referred to as Section 331 and Section 332. With regard to grant eligibility under Section 331, Section 331 requires an applicant to not only be an eligible entity, which we've already discussed, but to also qualify as a covered entity. A covered entity is an applicant, A, whose business is located in a low-income community as defined by federal law, B, who suffered a 30% or more reduction in revenue during any 8-week period from March 2nd, 2020 to December 31st, 2021, and C, who employs fewer than 300 people. If an applicant can show that the applicant meets all of these criteria, the applicant would be eligible for a $10,000 grant, which, unlike an EIDL loan, does not need to be paid back. Now, one of the questions that landlords have asked me is, do landlords use their rental property location or their office or home location to determine whether they are in a low-income community? Unfortunately, the answer to this question right now is unclear. However, my hunch is that the SBA will not allow landlords to use their rental property addresses for the purposes of qualifying for this grant under Section 331. Maybe they'll come out with guidance that says that they can, but I wouldn't count on it. So if you don't qualify for a grant under Section 331 because you have not suffered a 30% drop in your revenue and you don't live in a low-income community, you may still qualify for the grant under Section 332. However, Section 332 does not expressly say that an applicant would receive $10,000 if the applicant is eligible. Instead, Section 332 modifies the language of the original CARES Act to require the SBA to provide an eligible applicant with an EIDL grant in the amount that the applicant requests, with a maximum cap of $10,000. In theory, therefore, as long as the SBA complies with the law and allows applicants to set the amount of the grant in their request, applicants should be able to receive $10,000 as long as funds last. Now, I've talked about this in a couple of my other videos already, but it's possible that the SBA will not follow the law and will continue to stick to their original rule for Section 332, where they basically said that you're only going to get $1,000 per employee per applicant as far as the grant goes under Section 332. However, in my opinion, that would be a clear violation of the law on the part of the SBA, and the SBA will most likely be sued if they take this route. So how do landlords apply for the EIDL program? Well, the SBA has a website portal which is currently open for loan applications only. I'll put a link to the SBA portal in the description below so that if you guys are interested in applying, you can quickly find it and go straight there. It is expected that the SBA will use the same portal for the new EIDL grants as it's currently using for the EIDL loans. So you will be able to find both of them there once the SBA reopens its program. Rumor has it that the program will reopen on January 17th, 2021. So keep your eye on that and pay attention when the portal reopens. In the case of applicants who have previously applied, we are expecting them to receive some kind of notification from the SBA telling them that they may not need to apply again if they're already in the queue. Again, this is something that's speculated right now. We don't know for sure, but we're hoping that that is how the SBA handles these new EIDL grants. So here are my final thoughts on this. If you're a landlord who owned a rental property prior to January 31st, 2020, and you've suffered an economic injury as a result of the pandemic, I definitely think that you should consider applying for this program. Even if you don't want to accept a loan, it may be worthwhile for you to see if you can get a grant of up to $10,000. I know that for some of you that will not cover all of your losses, and for a few of you it may not even come close to covering all of your losses, but it's certainly better than nothing, which is what you have right now. Now, you may decide that you do not want the loan because of all the different restrictions and requirements that come with it. And I totally understand that, and obviously that is your choice and you have to assess it based on your personal situation. I know that a lot of people are not necessarily thrilled about taking on new debt just so that they can pay their current existing debt. But again, you have to assess your personal situation and see whether or not it will be worth it for you. I'll link all of my prior EIDL videos in a playlist down below so that if you guys have questions about different aspects of the EIDL program, you can check them out in those videos there. Before I conclude this video, if you guys are interested in investing in the stock market, if you want to diversify your investment portfolio from real estate into the stock market, consider using a commission-free platform like Webull. I do have an affiliate link in the description below where if you sign up for Webull on their platform and deposit $100, you will receive 4 free stocks. If that is something that you're interested in, consider signing up using my link. So with that said, that's going to do it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please do me a favor and hit the like button. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, definitely subscribe so that you don't miss any of my future content. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.